They say when twins are born, the universe splits, half a soul in one, half in the other. But in my case, I think my sister took the light and left me with the shadow. My name is Isabel Reeves. I'm 42 years old. And the night I walked into my bedroom to find my husband tangled in bedsheets with my twin sister was the night I stopped believing in love, in blood, in anything sacred. It didn't start that night, of course. It started years earlier, subtle, cruel things only a twin would understand. Mira and I were identical on the outside, but inside, we couldn't have been more different. I always tried to share my toys, my dreams, my dresses. She didn't want to share. She wanted to steal. She wanted my piano recitals, so she'd break the keys. She wanted my friends, so she whispered lies. And when I finally met Daniel, the man who made me feel like I was enough, she wanted him too. But I thought, this time, I'd won. He chose me. He married me. And Mira moved to another city. I thought we were safe. But one phone call changed that. Belle, she sniffled, using the name only family called me, my apartment caught fire. I don't have anywhere else to go. I hesitated. My silence lasted just a moment too long. It's just for a week, she added, soft and trembling. Please. How do you say no to your twin when she's crying? The first few days, she was charming. Sweet. Polite. She wore her hair differently. She cooked dinner. She joked with Daniel. And slowly, I began to feel invisible in my own home. One night, I came home from my book club to find them laughing in the kitchen over wine. My wine. My special bottle I'd been saving for our anniversary. Mira looked at me and smiled, we just opened one. You looked tired. I didn't say anything. But that night, I lay awake while Daniel slept beside me, staring at the ceiling, my chest tight with something that felt like fear, but I didn't know why yet. Then came that night. I stayed late at work. A charity auction ran over, and I forgot to text. When I got home, the lights were low. Candles flickered in the hallway. Soft music played. I smiled, we hadn't done anything romantic in months. I slipped off my shoes, crept into the bedroom, heart fluttering. And then, there was Daniel. On our bed. Eyes closed. Whispering my name. But it wasn't me he was touching. It was Mira. She turned her head slightly, saw me, and smiled. No shock. No guilt. Just a slow, smug smile like she'd won. Daniel leapt up, half-dressed, eyes wild. Isabel, God, I thought it was you. No, you didn't, I whispered. I wear glasses. She doesn't. I have a scar on my hip. She doesn't. You knew. Mira sat up and calmly pulled the sheet around her. Don't be dramatic, Belle. Mistakes happen. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just walked out. And that was the moment something in me broke, but not the way they hoped. I didn't file for divorce. I didn't throw things. I didn't yell. Instead, I started paying attention. Because when a woman is betrayed by both her blood and her heart, she doesn't beg. She plots. And what I uncovered next? It made that betrayal look like mercy. I didn't sleep that night. Or the night after. Daniel tried to talk. He cried, even. He swore it was an accident, said he was drunk, confused, didn't know how it happened. Mira, on the other hand, didn't bother with lies. She simply moved out the next morning, left a single note on the kitchen counter, "Don't be mad at me for wanting what you've always had." That sentence haunted me. But instead of falling apart, I fell quiet. And in that silence, I began to listen, not to their words, but to the sounds behind them. The closed doors. The deleted texts. The receipts that didn't match. I became something I never thought I'd be, a woman watching her own life like a detective standing outside the crime scene, picking up pieces. One morning, I stood in front of the mirror brushing my hair and noticed something missing from the dresser. A silver locket I wore every day since Daniel gave it to me on our first anniversary. It was gone. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from the quiet confirmation this wasn't new. Mira had been slipping into my life long before the night I caught them. She was replacing me piece by piece. That same day, I went looking for an old photo album in our guest room closet, the one she'd stayed in. While digging through boxes, I found a manila envelope stuffed behind a stack of old towels. I wish I could say I hesitated. But I didn't. I opened it. Inside were printed emails. Messages from Daniel to Mira. Some dated weeks before she moved in. Others going back years. I skimmed the subject lines first. I can't stop thinking about that night. She'll never understand me like you do. It should have been you I married. My vision blurred, but I kept reading. There was one email that was different. Shorter. No flirtation. No pet names. Just a single line from Mira. You said if she ever found out, I'd be the one to disappear. So why does she still live in your house? That's when I realized this wasn't a one-time betrayal. It wasn't even a love affair. It was a plan. I had married a man who wanted my twin. And I had a twin who wanted my life. The only thing stopping them from taking it all was me. But here's where the story turns. You see, people like Mira and Daniel? They think silence means weakness. But silence is just the space where women like me sharpen their knives. I began to collect my own evidence, old text backups, credit card statements, audio recordings. Mira had sent photos from my phone to herself. She'd worn my perfume. My clothes. My wedding ring, once, when I left it in the dish by the sink. And Daniel, he hadn't just cheated. He'd changed our mortgage. He'd moved money. And he'd named Mira as his emergency contact on several legal documents, including the will. And that's when I knew, they weren't just trying to break my heart. They were trying to erase me. So I smiled through dinners. Laughed when Daniel cracked jokes. I even invited Mira over for tea 2 weeks later, told her I was ready to move on. She raised an eyebrow, wore my sweater, and said, "I'm glad you're being mature about it." But as I poured her tea, I remembered what she once did to me when we were 15, when I had my first boyfriend. She kissed him behind the gym and told everyone it was me. That day, she gave me a necklace, one she'd stolen from our mother, and said, "Now we're even." She always wanted balance, but only when she won. This time, I would be the one to set the scales right. I made a plan. But before I could carry it out, I needed one more truth, one question I never dared ask: why Daniel? Why did she want him? So I waited until the next week. I told Daniel I was going to my sister's art exhibit, but I never showed up. Instead, I followed Mira. And what I found that day changed everything I thought I knew, about her, about us, and about the man I married. She wasn't meeting Daniel. She was meeting someone else. A man with the same green eyes, the same voice. But older. My father. The man who left when we were 9. The man who had only ever written to her. He stood under the pale green awning of a quiet cafe, tapping his fingers on a chipped ceramic mug. His hair was grayer than I remembered, thinner, curling at the ears, but those eyes? I'd know them anywhere. They were mine. They were Myra's. I froze behind a parked car, my heart thudding like it was trying to escape me. Mira sat across from him. Her hand rested on his. She looked small. Not the smug, denim-laced sister I knew. She looked like a child asking to be loved. I hadn't seen our father since we were 9 years old. He left on a Tuesday. Our mother stood in the driveway sobbing while he packed his briefcase like he was just going away for the weekend. He kissed Mira on the forehead. Didn't touch me. I asked once, years later, why he only wrote letters to her. Mira shrugged and said, he liked me more. I didn't believe her. Until now. They laughed softly. He passed her a wrapped gift. She opened it slowly and held up a pair of pearl earrings. Our mothers. The ones I thought were lost in the fire that destroyed our attic 20 years ago. Mira reached up and clipped them on. He smiled. I pressed my back to the car and covered my mouth. When she stood to leave, he hugged her. Long and tight. She clung to him like a lifeline. And then she whispered, "She still doesn't know. I told you I'd take it all back." I don't remember driving home. The world blurred into fog and glass. I walked through my front door and dropped my purse, feeling like I'd stepped out of my own skin. They had a secret. A long one. Maybe from before he even left. Maybe I never understood why Mira hated me so much, because the truth was buried deeper than I thought. That night, I opened a bottle of wine and sat on the kitchen floor, turning the words over in my mind. She still doesn't know. What didn't I know? I pulled down the old family photo albums. The one with yellowing pages and faded captions in Mom's handwriting. I hadn't touched them since she died 5 years ago. I stared at the pictures of us as kids, birthday parties, ballet classes, Christmas mornings. Then I saw it. A picture from the summer before he left. We were 8. I was blowing out the candles on my cake. Mira stood beside me. Her eyes were swollen. I thought it was from allergies back then. But now. I looked closer. She wasn't smiling. Neither was he. His eyes were on her, not me. Not the cake. Not my birthday. I turned the page. A torn edge. A missing photo. The caption read, "Last beach trip before everything changed." I remembered that trip. I remembered the water was cold and Mira wouldn't go in. I remembered waking up to her crying in the tent and Mom shouting at our father in the dark. I suddenly felt sick. I climbed into the attic at midnight. Dust clung to my nightgown. I opened every old box labeled with my mother's handwriting until I found one that had never made sense to me, Mira, private. Inside were drawings. Letters. And a journal. It wasn't Myra's handwriting. It was our mother's. She'd written entries during that beach trip. Pages that chilled me to the bone. She told me he touched her. I wanted to believe she lied. But the way she trembles around him now. I know the truth. I begged him to leave. I threatened to tell. He laughed. He said no one would believe me. Especially not Isabel. She worships him. Mira doesn't sleep anymore. She watches Isabel constantly. She says if I don't protect them both, she will. My stomach clenched. Mira hadn't been trying to steal my life because she hated me. She was trying to take back the part of it that was stolen from her while I was too innocent to notice. I closed the journal and sat in the dust, knees pulled to my chest, the house around me silent. And in that silence, for the first time in my life, I wept for my sister. I couldn't look at Mira the same way after that night. For so long, I'd hated her with every cell in my body, resented her for taking Daniel, for mocking my gentleness, for trying to become me. But now, I saw the shape of her pain, how it wrapped around her like armor, barbed and silent. I didn't excuse what she did. But I understood it. And sometimes understanding hurts more than hate ever could. I didn't speak to Daniel for 3 days. He noticed. Of course he did. He came home with flowers, cooking dinner like nothing had happened, asking if I'd be ready to talk when I had calmed down. Calmed down? As if my entire life hadn't become a funhouse reflection, my twin in my bed, my husband calling her by my name, and now the father I buried in my memory wrapped around both of them like a secret vine choking the truth. I nodded. Soon, I said. That night, after he fell asleep, I unlocked the bottom drawer of his home office. I knew the code. It was still our anniversary date. Pathetic. Inside were financial files, a hidden burner phone, and a stack of legal papers with Myra's name listed as next of kin, medical proxy, and, worst of all, joint account beneficiary on his secret investment portfolio. Not me. Her. So much made sense now. The way he didn't fight for us after I caught them. How he barely asked Mira to leave. His panic wasn't about losing me. It was about timing. Something was coming, and I was in the way. I photocopied everything. The next day, I asked Mira to meet me at the lake where we used to go as girls. We hadn't been back there since the summer before our father left. It was cold that morning, fog curling over the water like ghosts. She arrived late, wrapped in my old blue coat, like she always used to steal. She looked tired. "What is this?" she said, arms folded. "I know," I said softly. She didn't blink. "Know what?" "About the journal. The beach. What he did to you." Myra's lips parted, but no sound came out. Her face cracked. Not like porcelain. Like flesh, human, real, raw. She dropped her bag to the ground and sat down on the old wooden bench like someone had pulled the bones from her body. "You read Mom's writing?" I nodded. My throat burned. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" She looked at the lake. "Because you looked up to him. And I looked like you. So every time I saw your face, I saw what he wanted." I sat beside her. We didn't speak for a long time. Then I asked, "Why Daniel?" She laughed bitterly. "Because he looked at you the way he was supposed to. The way someone was supposed to. I wanted to feel it for once. To be chosen. For real. But I ruined it. Like always." I didn't say anything. I just watched her wipe her eyes with the sleeves of a coat that didn't belong to her. "I didn't mean for it to go that far," she said. "He kissed me once at Mom's funeral. I told him to stop. Then months passed. He started writing me. I ignored it. Then I didn't." "He was grooming you," I whispered. Mira looked at me sharply. "He was using me. But don't act like I didn't want the power, Belle." I did. I wanted to win for once. We stared at each other. Identical eyes. Identical pain. But so much distance between us, I could have been staring across a canyon. "I'm not letting him get away with this," I said. "And you shouldn't either." She tilted her head. "You have a plan?" I looked her in the eye and nodded. "But it only works if you're in it." Mira stood, gathering her bag. "I'll think about it." As she walked away, I saw her shoulders hunched, smaller than I remembered. And I realized, my twin sister didn't take my place. She had no place to begin with. But I was about to make sure Daniel lost his. Completely. I spent the next 3 days in near silence, plotting like I was building a house out of glass, every wall transparent, every step calculated, every word placed with the precision of someone who had nothing left to lose. I didn't cry anymore. I didn't shake. I had passed through grief into something colder. Not rage. Not even revenge. Just clarity. Daniel had no idea what was coming. He still kissed my forehead before bed. Still complimented my cooking. Still touched me with hands that had touched my sister. And I let him. Because I needed him blind. I needed him confident. I needed him to think he'd won. Mira texted me the night before our plan began. "I'm in. Let's burn him together." I stared at her message for a long time, remembering the girl she used to be. The one who clutched her stuffed rabbit in bed and whispered that the thunder sounded like monsters trying to find us. Maybe they had. Maybe we just grew up and became the monsters ourselves. The next morning, I slipped into Daniel's study while he was in the shower. I placed one of the photocopies, his signature on the beneficiary transfer, on the desk with a red pen line under Myra's name. I knew he'd notice. And I knew exactly how he'd react. He confronted me over breakfast. Eyes hard, voice sharp, mask slipping. "Where did you get that?" I didn't flinch. From the drawer. The one with your secret bank account. Did you really think I wouldn't look? His nostrils flared. That wasn't meant for you to see. No, I said. It was meant for the woman you really love. My sister. The one you've been preparing a future with. His eyes narrowed. You're being dramatic. And you're being a cliché, I snapped. You're not the first man to fall for the twin. But you might be the first dumb enough to document it. He turned pale. You don't have proof. I smiled. You signed the proof. That night, I called Mira. We met in the same cafe where she'd once met our father. The same cracked mug. The same window seat. But this time, we weren't daughters hoping to be loved. We were women with a shared enemy. I've been recording him, she whispered, pulling a small device from her coat. He talks in his sleep. He says your name. But it's me he dreams about. He's obsessed with us, Belle. Not just with me. With us. She slid the recorder across the table. I pressed play. Daniel's voice murmured in the dark, slurred and eerie, they're the same. Doesn't matter who. One soul. Two bodies. She doesn't know. She'll never know. I made sure Mira was mine first. That summer, I stopped the recording. My stomach twisted. First? Myra's hands were shaking. What if he wasn't confused that night? What if he planned it? Years ago? The thought burrowed into me like ice. I reached across the table and grabbed her hand. Then we end this. Not just the affair. All of it. We decided to take him down piece by piece. Mira would pretend to reconcile. Let him think he still had a chance. Keep recording. Keep digging. I would play the perfect wife. The trusting one. The woman rebuilding. And while he relaxed, we would trap him legally, financially, emotionally. We weren't just going to punish Daniel. We were going to make him beg to be forgotten. 3 weeks passed. Long enough for Daniel to start believing the worst was behind us. Long enough for me to perfect my smile in the mirror each morning, that soft upward curl that said, I forgive you, even when I could barely stand the sound of his breathing at night. Long enough for Mira to work her poison in the shadows, like only she could. If I was the steady hand, she was the flick of the match. Daniel started visiting her again. Not in secret, no, that would have been too obvious. He did it under the veil of closure, like we were all adults navigating something complicated but civil. He'd say, she just needs help moving on. And I'd nod. Of course. Take your time. Inside, my heart roared with disgust. But I'd learned, men like Daniel feed on reaction. Silence is the slowest poison. Mira and I spoke through burner phones. Her messages were clipped, strategic. He offered to open an account together. He's hiding cash. I've got audio. He said you'll fade out soon. His words. I asked if he loved you. He laughed. He said, I love the idea of her. Not the mess she became. I never cried after reading those. I just filed each one into a folder I titled, The Undoing. It grew thicker by the day. I contacted a lawyer next. A friend of my mother's. Discreet. Unshakable. I didn't tell her everything, just enough to raise questions about Daniel's hidden assets and the fraudulent use of my name on financial documents. Her eyes sharpened. Do you want to go public with this? Not yet, I said. First, I want him surrounded. Then I want him exposed. She leaned back. Sounds like you've been rehearsing this. I gave her a small smile. Every night since I found them in my bed. Back home, I pretended to bake. To garden. To care about our book club and our neighbors. Daniel went back to working late, pretending he wasn't sneaking across town to Myra's apartment. I let him. Because I had planted a small camera in Myra's hallway. And on a Thursday night, I watched him walk in with a bottle of wine and a USB drive. I texted Mira immediately. "Don't let him plug that in." She replied, "Too late." "Already did." I froze. Minutes ticked by. Then, he said there's a folder with everything. Photos. Audio. Of us. Of you. He's saving it for leverage. Insurance in case you turn ugly. My skin prickled. So he was planning more than betrayal. He was planning blackmail. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my office, staring at the moonlit driveway, remembering the early days, how he held me when my mother died, how he pressed his forehead to mine after our first miscarriage, how he told me, "You're not broken, Belle. You're my home." It was all a script. A beautifully rehearsed lie. The next day, I invited him to dinner. A special one. "Our anniversary," I said. He looked surprised but pleased. He wore the tie I bought him on our honeymoon. Brought lilies. Even poured wine like we were just two people rediscovering love. I led him to the garden, where I'd set a table beneath the lights. Candles flickered. The wine shimmered red. He raised his glass. "To us." I raised mine. "To endings." He blinked. "Endings?" I leaned forward, smile steady. "I know everything, Daniel. The affair. The forged documents. The second account. The USB with your insurance." He lowered his glass. "What are you talking about?" "No lies tonight," I said. "Just one answer, was it ever real?" "Me." "Us." His face shifted, something flickering behind the mask. Then a slow shrug. "Real enough, Belle. Until it wasn't." I nodded. "Thank you." He frowned. "Thank you?" I stood, walked into the house, and returned with a thick envelope. I dropped it in front of him. His eyes scanned the first page. Audio transcripts. Copies of the bank documents. Photos. Surveillance stills. His hands trembled. "What the hell is this?" "Your end, Daniel." I walked away as he shouted after me. But I didn't turn back. Because by the time he finished that wine, the lawyer would be filing papers. And Mira would be uploading the first tape. By morning, the first clip had gone live. It wasn't posted to social media. That would have been too messy, too noisy. Mira uploaded it to a private Dropbox folder and sent the link directly to 6 people: our lawyer, Daniel's company's board, his sister Claire, the HR director where he worked, and 2 old friends of his he'd once drunkenly bragged to about having both twins in his bed. The clip was short. Deliberate. Just Daniel's voice, recorded while half asleep in Myra's bed, slurring, "She thinks I married her for love. I married her for her credit score. Her house. Her connections. Myra's the one I wanted. Myra's always been better. Tighter." I couldn't listen past that. But others did. And they responded. By noon, Claire had sent me a single-line email: "I am so sorry. Tell me what you need." By 4, his boss left a voicemail: "Daniel's been suspended pending internal review. I hope you're safe." Daniel, of course, hadn't realized anything yet. He returned home that evening like nothing had changed, smiling, smug, tossing his keys onto the table and loosening his tie. But I watched his face when his phone buzzed. Then buzzed again. Then again. He picked it up, tapped the screen, and his entire body tensed. "Belle," he said sharply, "did you?" "I did," I answered, calmly, folding towels in the hallway like I had no idea he was cracking open. His jaw flexed. "You've ruined me." "No," I said, meeting his eyes. "You did that all on your own." I just held up a mirror. He stormed past me into the bedroom, rifling through drawers, pulling open closets, cursing under his breath. "What are you looking for?" I asked from the doorway. The flash drive, he snapped. You took it. I tilted my head. Didn't need to. Mira gave me the copies. She's smarter than you think. His mouth twisted into something ugly. She's a crazy little bitch. She's nothing without me. I took a slow breath. She survived more than you know. And so have I. Daniel stood there, breathing hard, his empire crumbling in his hands. I walked over and placed another envelope on the bed beside him, divorce papers, already signed. Inside was also a notarized statement listing every lie he'd told, every document he'd forged, and every financial move he'd made using my name. You're going to sign these, I said quietly, and walk away with whatever dignity you have left. Or I'll make sure you lose everything, including your job, your license, your reputation. Your choice. He didn't move. So I added, and if you ever speak to Mira again, if you ever try to twist her back into your orbit, I'll go public. All of it. No filters. No redactions. Just the truth. His hand hovered above the envelope. And then he laughed. A low, bitter, broken sound. I should have picked the other sister, he muttered. I smiled softly. You did. And now both of us picked ourselves. He signed. And just like that, Daniel Reeves, charming husband, manipulative partner, professional predator, became nothing more than a signature on paper. I stood there a moment longer after he left. The house felt still. Not empty. Not yet peaceful. But something else. Ready. He moved out the next day. He didn't slam the door. He didn't rage or weep. He just left, like a man who knew there was nowhere left to hide. I watched from the upstairs window as he loaded the last box into his car. No suitcases, just files, electronics, and the shattered pieces of the double life he thought he could control. When the car rolled down the driveway, I didn't wave. I didn't breathe until I could no longer see his taillights. And then I sat down on the bedroom floor and stared at the bare closet where his clothes once hung. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt quiet. As if my body needed to relearn how to live without fear, without pretending. That night, Mira came over. She looked different. Not younger. Not prettier. Just lighter, like someone who had been carrying a lead blanket on her back and had finally let it fall. She didn't knock. She walked in like she belonged again. Like she used to when we were 16 and I'd sneak her into my room after Mom grounded her for swearing at the dinner table. We sat in the kitchen, drinking tea like it wasn't the ruins of my marriage around us. Mira stirred her cup slowly, avoiding my eyes. Do you remember the fire? She asked, out of nowhere. I blinked. What fire? The attic. When Mom said it was a short circuit, but it wasn't. It was me. I lit one of Dad's old shirts on fire. I stared at her. She laughed bitterly. I wanted to burn him out of the house. I thought fire erased memory. I reached over and put my hand on hers. You were 10. I was already broken, she whispered. I squeezed her fingers. You were hurt. That's not the same thing. We sat like that for a while. Then she said something I didn't expect. I thought I hated you. I know, I said softly. But I didn't, she continued. I hated that you got to forget. I hated that you never saw it. That he only touched me. That you were safe. I felt the tears then. Not because of guilt, but because I finally understood the full weight she carried all those years. While I slept peacefully, she lay awake afraid. While I dreamed of weddings, she woke from nightmares. I wish I could go back, I said. I would have fought for you. I would have burned it down with you. Mira looked at me, and for a flicker of a moment, she wasn't the woman who took my place in my bed. She wasn't the rival who ruined my marriage. She was my sister. My twin. And for the first time since we were little girls, we cried together. Not from pain, but from relief. In the weeks that followed, silence became its own kind of healing. No more pretending. No more flinching at the sight of a shared shirt or hearing the wrong name whispered in the dark. The house, once tense and shadowed, began to breathe again. I didn't rush to redecorate. I didn't scrub away every trace of Daniel. I let it sit. Let myself feel every corner of the damage. Because before I could move on, I had to know where I had been shattered. Mira started staying over more often. Sometimes she brought old sketches she used to hide, and we pinned them on the walls like scars made beautiful. Sometimes she just curled up on the couch with me and said nothing. Those nights, we didn't watch TV. We listened, to the sound of the fridge humming, to the way our laughter returned slowly, like a bird coaxed back to a windowsill. One night, I found her standing in front of the bathroom mirror, just staring. Her face looked pale in the dim light. Hollowed. You okay? I asked. She didn't blink. Do you ever look in the mirror and forget which one you are? The question wasn't rhetorical. No, I said carefully, stepping closer. But I think you do. She turned to me, voice breaking. When he touched me, I told myself I was you. Because you were safe. Loved. You had him. And he didn't scare you. I pressed my forehead to hers. You didn't become me, Mira. You disappeared. She shook her head. I still don't know who I am. That night, I took down every mirror in the house. Not because I was afraid of seeing her. But because I wanted her to look inward for once. Not at who she resembled. Not at the reflection that reminded her of everything taken, but at the girl who survived it. We painted the walls 2 days later. Warm colors. Earth tones. Nothing glossy. She chose ochre for the kitchen. I picked forest green for the hallway. We laughed when we spilled paint on our feet. And for the first time since our mother died, Mira said, "This feels like home." I didn't say it back right away. Because for me, home wasn't a color. Or a silence. Or even a sister returned. Home, I was learning, was the sound of grief loosening its grip. And the echo it left behind was beginning to sound a lot like peace. We kept our routines simple. I'd make breakfast. Mira would clean up. She started leaving her art supplies scattered on the dining table, ink-stained brushes, water bowls, scraps of half-finished sketches. I didn't mind. In fact, I liked it. It meant someone was living here again. Someone real. Someone unafraid. One morning, she didn't come down for coffee. At first, I thought nothing of it. I figured she was sleeping in. But by noon, when I knocked and got no answer, I pushed the door open. She wasn't in bed. But the bed had been slept in. There was something eerie about the way the blanket was folded halfway down, pillow dented as if someone had bolted upright in the middle of the night. A smear of lipstick on the edge of a coffee mug on the nightstand. Her phone still charging, untouched. But no Mira. My heart did a strange twist. I walked through the house slowly, calling her name. I checked the garage. The backyard. The attic. Nothing. Then I opened the guest room closet, and found something I hadn't seen in years. A shoebox. Labeled, "Don't open unless you want to know everything." Myra's handwriting. Slanted, tense. My hand shook as I took the lid off. Inside were photographs. Dozens. Some torn. Some stuck together. All of them old. Our childhood. Our teenage years. And one that nearly made me drop the box. It was me and Daniel. But not a wedding photo. Not even a candid. It was taken from a distance. A blurred, grainy shot of us sitting together on a park bench. And beside that photo, was another. Same day. Same park. But Mira was in the background. Watching. Every photo in that box showed some version of the same thing. Me and Daniel. And Mira, somewhere close. Unseen. Hidden behind a tree. A lamppost. A shop window. Eyes locked on us. I staggered back. This hadn't started when he touched her. It had started long before. I sat on the floor, breath shallow, as I pulled out a folded piece of paper taped under the box lid. A letter. Addressed to me. Belle, I don't know when you'll find this. Maybe never. But if you do, you need to know, I didn't come back just to heal. I came back to finish something. Something that's been eating at me since I was 16. You always had him. Even before you knew it. You always had everything. And I needed to know, was it you he loved? Or just the idea of us? That night in your bed, it wasn't a mistake. I needed to see if he'd notice. He didn't. So I left because if I stayed, I might become her again. The girl who waits in shadows. Who watches. Who takes what doesn't belong. I'm not proud. But I'm free now. And I hope, one day, you can be too. And the house felt cold. Still. Like she'd taken her warmth with her. I didn't know where she went. But I knew this much, Mira didn't just leave me to find herself. She left me to find the truth. The whole, tangled, brutal truth of who we were. And now, alone in the house that used to be mine, I had to decide, was I ready to forgive the woman who took my place? Or would I finally take back every piece of me she ever tried to steal? I didn't eat that day. Or the day after. The house was too quiet, too clean, too full of ghosts that looked like me. Myra's jacket still hung on the back of the chair. Her sketchbook lay open on the table to an unfinished drawing, our faces side by side, shaded in soft charcoal. We looked peaceful. Like sisters who had always loved each other. But now I knew the truth. She hadn't just wanted Daniel's touch. She wanted to know if he could tell us apart. He couldn't. And the wound that left behind was wider than I could admit. I stayed in bed most of the third day, curtains drawn, barely moving. I couldn't tell if I missed her, or hated her all over again. She was a storm that kept circling back, each time wearing a new disguise, victim, lover, sister, stranger. And I'd let her in. Again. It was evening when the doorbell rang. I didn't move at first. I figured it was a delivery. Or someone trying to sell me solar panels. But then it rang again. And again. Urgent. I wrapped my cardigan tight and walked slowly to the door. It wasn't Mira. It was Claire, Daniel's sister. She looked exhausted. But determined. Her eyes flicked past me, searching the hall. "Can we talk?" she asked, voice low. I hesitated. Then nodded. We sat in the living room. The last time she was here was Christmas 3 years ago, when Daniel still pretended to be the kind of man who sent handwritten cards and kissed his wife's cheek while she carved ham. Claire handed me a folder. Inside were more documents. And photos. Daniel. Mira. Me. But there was one photo that froze my breath. It was from over a decade ago. Daniel standing next to Mira. His hand on her back. The expression on her face, blank, almost dazed. The timestamp said it was taken 8 months before our wedding. I looked up at Claire, confused. That was the first time I caught him with her, she said. She was 19. I felt the floor tilt. No, I whispered. That's not possible. They didn't speak until after Mom's funeral. They told you that, she said. But I knew. I warned him. I told him if he didn't stop, I'd report him. He said she was an adult. Said she knew what she was doing. I gripped the armrest. Why didn't you tell me? Because she begged me not to, Claire said softly. She said you wouldn't believe her. That you'd blame her. And maybe she was right. The folder slipped from my lap, They weren't in love, I murmured. They were trapped. Claire's voice cracked. I think she loved you more than you knew. But by the time she realized what he was, she thought the damage was done. I sat still for a long time after she left. Then I walked to the wall of framed photos in the hallway. Daniel and I at our wedding. Me holding a glass of wine, smiling in sunlight. Mira in the background of so many of them. Just outside the spotlight. I took one down. Pulled out the photo. And tore it down the center. One sister on each side. Separate. At last. It rained that night, the kind of heavy, relentless downpour that made the whole world feel like it was drowning in its own secrets. I lay in bed wide awake, the torn photograph still resting on the nightstand beside me. I couldn't stop staring at it. One half was my face, smiling on my wedding day. The other was Mira, just behind me, eyes barely visible. Watching. Always watching. I had so many questions and nowhere to put them. Had she been trying to warn me all along? Or had she been trying to become me? Did she hate me? Or had she wanted to save me, in her own twisted, broken way? Around 2 a.m., I got up. I didn't bother with slippers or a robe. I padded barefoot into the garage and pulled down the old storage trunk Mom had left me. Inside, wrapped in yellowed fabric, were the journals. Hers. From the year everything collapsed. I hadn't been ready to read them before. Now, I had no choice. I brought them to the kitchen and sat under the dim light, flipping pages that smelled like smoke and lavender. Most entries were mundane, grocery lists, garden notes, but then I found one marked in red ink. The margins were shaky. Mira had another nightmare. She woke up screaming. I tried to comfort her, but she shoved me away. It was him again, she said. But this time I didn't cry. I smiled. I don't know what that means. I don't know what's happening inside her head. But I'm scared of what she's becoming. I flipped to the next entry. She stole Isabel's dress today. Wore it to school. No one noticed. Not even the teachers. She cried when she came home. I can be her, and no one knows, she whispered. So what's the point of being me? I held her. I didn't know what else to do. Another page. I confronted him again. Told him I knew. Told him to leave. He laughed. Said if I pushed too hard, he'd take both girls and disappear. Said no one would believe the daughter who talks to walls and the mother who takes pills. I stopped reading. I couldn't. I looked up and realized the rain had stopped. The house was silent. Too silent. And then, like something out of a dream, I heard a car door slam outside. I rose slowly, walked to the front window. A figure stood at the curb. A woman, shoulders hunched, arms wrapped tight around herself. Hair soaked. Clothes clinging to her like wet paper. Mira. I didn't move. She didn't either. We just stared at each other through the glass and the dark. And finally, I opened the door. She didn't speak. She just held out a crumpled photograph, one I'd never seen. It was the three of us. Me, Mira, and Mom. Sitting on the back porch the day after Dad left. Myra's head on my shoulder. My arm wrapped around her. On the back, she had written in faded ink, "Before the fire. Before the lies. Before we broke." I stepped aside. And she came in. We didn't speak that night. I made her tea. She didn't drink it. She stood in the hallway for a long time, staring at the spot where Daniel's coat used to hang. Then she moved to the living room, sat cross-legged on the floor like she used to when we were girls watching cartoons, and just stared at the empty fireplace. I sat across from her in silence. Finally, hours later, she said, "I thought I could stay away. I thought if I left, it would kill the part of me that still wanted your life." I didn't flinch. She went on, her voice brittle. "But I realized. I never wanted your life. I wanted to stop being the version of me that he made. Her eyes filled, but she didn't let the tears fall. When you found me in bed with him, I wanted you to scream. To hate me. Because I already hated myself. And hate felt safer than forgiveness. My hands tightened around my tea mug. You should hate me, she whispered. You have every right. I did, I said. But then I found Mom's journals. Her face paled. You read them? All of them. She pulled her knees to her chest. Then you know. What I became. No, I said. I know what you survived. She finally looked at me. Really looked. Like she didn't believe what she was hearing. You didn't become him, Mira, I said gently. You became a woman built from ash. And I think somewhere along the way, you forgot that ash is what feeds the soil. She laughed, a broken little sound. You and your metaphors. I smiled faintly. It's how I make sense of the pain. Myra's voice dropped. I see him sometimes. In strangers. In crowds. I still wake up thinking I'm 13 and trapped in his room. I hate that. I hate how much of me still belongs to him. I leaned forward. Then let's take it back. She blinked. What do you mean? I stood, walked to the bookshelf, and pulled down the old wooden box Mom had used to store our childhood keepsakes. I opened it and handed Mira the small, charred journal we had hidden from everyone. It wasn't Mom's. It was hers. Mira opened it with trembling fingers. Inside were scribbles, drawings, fragmented memories of nights she could barely talk about. And at the end, one line in her childlike handwriting, if no one believes me, maybe I'll believe myself. She clutched it to her chest and broke. Not softly. Not politely. She sobbed like something inside her had finally given up fighting. I wrapped my arms around her, and for the first time since we were little girls sharing a bed and secrets and bruises we didn't know how to name, we let it out together. All of it. We cried until the sun rose. And then we slept on the floor, two sisters tangled in blankets and forgiveness, while the fire of our past burned down to something quiet. Something survivable. I woke before she did. Myra's breath was slow, deep, her face finally free of that familiar tension, like she was no longer bracing for impact in her sleep. I watched her for a moment, then stood and stepped into the kitchen, still barefoot, floor cold beneath my feet. The house was quiet, but not heavy anymore. It felt like the air had shifted. Not back to what it was before, because that world was gone. But into something new. Something waiting. I made coffee. Black. Just like Mom used to. Then I opened the drawer in the hallway desk. The one I hadn't touched in over a year. Inside, beneath expired insurance forms and brittle receipts, was a letter. Folded. Unsent. It was addressed to Daniel. I sat at the table and opened it, letting the paper speak words I never had the courage to say aloud. Daniel, I wanted to hate you cleanly. To throw your clothes out, to scream in the street, to erase you like you erased the truth from our marriage. But hatred doesn't burn clean, it lingers like smoke. It seeps into everything. I gave you all the softest parts of me. My secrets. My shame. My trust. And you twisted them into a game I didn't know I was playing. I know what you did to Mira. I know it started long before I thought. And I know the kind of man you are, because now I've read your lies in your own handwriting. I'm not writing this to ask you why. I don't care anymore. I'm writing this to say, I survived you. And so did she. I folded the letter again. Not because I wanted to keep it. But because someday, maybe, Mira would need to see it too. She came into the kitchen sometime after noon, eyes puffy but calm. She sat across from me, reached for her mug. I dreamt about the house, she said. The old one. Which part? I asked. The hallway, she whispered. Where he used to wait for me at night. I reached across the table and placed the letter in front of her. It was for him, I said. But I think you're the one who needs it now. She read it slowly. Line by line. Her shoulders trembled. I wish I'd had your strength back then, she said. No, I said. You had your own kind. The kind that survives quietly, even when no one sees. She stared out the window for a long time, the letter clutched in her hand like something holy. Then she said, "Can we go there? To the old house?" She nodded. Just once. Before it's torn down. I didn't ask how she knew. I didn't need to. We packed that evening. Not for long. Just enough for a night. The house had been empty for years, since Mom died. Since we locked that chapter behind us like it couldn't find a way through. But now, we weren't going back to live in it. We were going back to finish the story. To walk through the ashes of our childhood. And finally stop pretending we'd ever left them behind. We drove in silence. The roads were familiar in that eerie, muscle memory kind of way, the turns that still lived in our bones, the rusted mile markers that hadn't moved since we were children. Trees lined the highway like quiet sentinels, and I wondered how many of them had watched us grow up through the windows of that house. I glanced at Mira once. Her jaw was tight, eyes focused ahead, hands gripping the steering wheel like if she let go, the car would pull her back into the past on its own. The house sat at the end of a gravel road, sunken behind an overgrown garden and a crooked fence half-eaten by moss. The windows were boarded. The porch sagged. But it was still standing. Still holding its secrets like breath in its rotted lungs. Mira parked, but neither of us moved. I used to think it was alive, she whispered. Like it had a heart. And that it beat loudest when he was angry. I said nothing. The wind brushed through the trees. Even that sounded like a memory here. Finally, we stepped out. The porch creaked under our feet. The front door was locked, but the side window, our old trick, was still loose. Mira pried it open, and we slipped through like ghosts coming home. Inside, the air was thick with dust and silence. The wallpaper peeled like skin. The scent was familiar, wood rot and something sour that had never left. I stood in the living room, staring at the couch where we used to pile on Saturday mornings, cartoons blaring, cereal bowls clutched in our laps. The television was gone now. But I could still hear the echo of our laughter. Of innocence. Mira walked ahead of me, room by room. She didn't speak. Didn't cry. She moved like someone revisiting the scene of a crime where her body had once been the evidence. She stopped at the hallway. The one with the closet. His closet. She didn't open it. Just pressed her palm against the old wooden door. I watched her shoulders tighten. Then she turned. I used to stand here every night, she said. Waiting for him to go to bed. Sometimes he'd pass by me. Look right through me. Other nights, she swallowed hard. I used to count the steps. From his room to mine. 7. Always 7. I still hear them in my dreams. I crossed the room and wrapped my arms around her from behind. I believe you, I whispered. She closed her eyes and leaned into me. We stayed like that for a while. Then she said something I didn't expect. I used to wish you'd wake up and see it. I used to pray you'd hear something. Save me. But you never did. My throat clenched. I'm sorry, I said. I should have seen you. She turned to face me. You do now. Later, we walked upstairs. Our childhood bedroom still had our names scratched into the floorboard under the window. Mine carved with care. Hers jagged, hurried, almost angry. Mira pulled something from her pocket. A matchbox. I raised an eyebrow. She shrugged. Symbolic. I didn't argue. She struck a match and held it under the old curtains for a few seconds. The flame licked at the fabric, caught, and slowly began to climb. We didn't panic. We didn't rush. We just stepped outside and watched it spread. The fire wasn't big. Just enough to blacken the memories we couldn't bear to carry anymore. The house didn't scream. It didn't fight. It just burned, quiet and slow, like it had been waiting to let go, too. When the flames died, and the ashes cooled, Mira turned to me. "Do you feel it?" she asked. I nodded. Lighter. And for the first time, I believed we were. The morning after the fire, we sat on the hood of the car watching the smoke curl into the sky like a soul finally escaping. No one came. No neighbors. No firefighters. The house was too old, too forgotten, too unwanted. It died quietly. The way Mira once said she wished she could have. And in that, there was a strange kind of peace. She held her sketchbook on her knees, but didn't draw. Just stared at the empty lot like it owed her an apology. "He used to tell me," she murmured, "that no one would believe the quiet girl." That silence meant guilt. I didn't say anything. I let her keep talking. "But it wasn't guilt," she said, voice stronger now. "It was fear. It was exhaustion. It was trying to scream through a throat stitched shut." I reached over and took her hand. "You're not the quiet girl anymore." She looked at me. And for the first time in our lives, her face didn't look like a mirror. It looked like her own. Worn, scarred, resilient. Beautiful in the way wildflowers are beautiful, untamed, blooming through stone. When we got back home later that day, she asked if she could repaint her room. The guest room, which had always been mine in her eyes. She wanted it white. Plain. Clean. We drove to the hardware store together. She chose the shade herself, Winter Moon. That night, we painted with music on in the background, old songs from our teenage years. We laughed at how much our bodies ached after just one coat. We spilled paint on the floor. We danced like we were 17 and free. Halfway through the second wall, she stopped, brush dripping, and looked at me. "I was afraid you'd never let me come back," she said. I paused, heart caught in my chest. "I almost didn't." "I know," she said. "But you did." She set the brush down, took a deep breath, and added, "And maybe I needed to earn that. Not just your forgiveness. But mine." I nodded slowly. "You did." We finished painting just after midnight. She lit a candle and placed it on the windowsill. "For Mom," she said. I nodded. We stood there, two women who had clawed their way back from hell, staring at a soft flame that didn't threaten to burn. Later, I passed the mirror in the hallway. The one we'd taken down months ago, but I had quietly rehung without telling her. I paused. And for the first time, I didn't flinch at the reflection. Mira passed behind me and caught sight of herself. She froze. Then stepped closer. Stared at her own eyes. She touched the glass gently. And whispered, "There's no shadow this time." I turned out the light behind us. But her face remained. Clear. Unafraid. The garden had been neglected for months. Weeds curling like questions around the fence, old roses drooping with the weight of past summers. It used to be Daniel's favorite place. He'd pruned the hedges like they were trophies, trimmed the lavender into neat little rows, told guests, "Belle keeps the house, I keep the soil." I used to find it charming. Now, I knew what it was. Control masked his charm. A man marking territory. Mira stood at the edge of the garden that morning, arms folded. "I think we should tear it up." "All of it?" I asked. She nodded. "Start fresh." It felt symbolic, and maybe that's why I agreed. We spent hours ripping out what was dead, digging up roots that had long since stopped feeding anything alive. I didn't expect to find anything buried. But near the old sundial, Myra's shovel hit something solid. She paused. "You hear that?" We knelt together and brushed away the dirt. A metal box. Rusted shut. My breath caught. "Is that one of Mom's?" Mira shook her head slowly. No. This one's his. I hesitated, then grabbed a spade and pried it open. Inside, Polaroids. Old ones. Mostly of Mira. Some of me. Some of both of us. But not the kind a father would keep. The kind you hide. One photo made my stomach drop. Mira, no older than 15, standing in her swimsuit by the lake, looking over her shoulder. A red mark on her thigh. The date was scribbled in faded ink. He had written the word mine. Myra's face turned white. She didn't speak. I took the box from her gently and walked it to the fire pit at the edge of the yard. I doused it with lighter fluid and struck a match. We watched it burn. The photos curled and blackened, one by one. The box groaned in the heat, the rust hissing as it cracked open wider. Mira stepped closer, her voice a whisper. I thought he only stole my body. But he stole my memory too. I wrapped my arms around her. Then let's take it back. All of it. After the fire died, we planted something in its place. Not a flower. A tree. A fig sapling. It will take years to grow. Maybe more than we have. But that's the point. We buried our past beneath its roots. Not to forget. But to remember differently. Not as victims. But as women who survived the worst kind of erasure, and chose, every single day, to rewrite the story in their own hands. It started with a letter. No return address. Just our house number written in crooked print. Mira found it in the mailbox and handed it to me without a word. Inside was a single sheet of paper. I know what happened. I saw what you burned. He wasn't the only one. There are others. I need to talk. Before they find me. See? We stared at the letter in silence. See? Mira whispered. Who the hell is C? I didn't know. But my gut twisted in that old, familiar way. 2 days later, another letter came. Same print. I was one of them. But I was older. I knew it was wrong. I watched him with your sister. I said nothing. I'm sorry. Myra's hands trembled as she folded the page. That night, she barely touched her food. I caught her in the hallway, eyes red, pacing. Do you think there were more? She asked. I didn't want to answer. Because deep down, I knew. Daniel was one predator. Our father was another. But men like them rarely act alone. They build networks. Brotherhoods of silence. They hide behind charm, careers, families. C was a crack in the wall. And it was spreading. On the third day, a woman knocked on the door. Middle-aged, frizzy hair, eyes that didn't trust easily. She wore a worn scarf and clutched a small leather purse like it was armor. I'm Carla, she said softly. I wrote the letters. I invited her in. She sat on the edge of the couch like someone expecting to be punished. I used to clean your father's office, she began. Back when he worked in the city. He'd bring her in, your sister. Said she was helping him file papers. Mira stiffened beside me. Carla swallowed hard. I knew something was wrong. I saw her once. In the break room. Crying. She had bruises. She couldn't have been more than 12. She wiped her eyes. I didn't say anything. I was afraid. I had a daughter of my own. I needed the job. But I watched. And I remember her. The way she looked at the door like it might save her. And then I saw the news, years later, about your mom. And I thought maybe it ended. That maybe she was safe. She looked directly at Mira now. I was wrong. And I'm so sorry. Myra's lips parted, but no sound came. Instead, she got up, walked to the mantel, picked up an old photo, one of her, at 10 years old, holding a kitten. She handed it to Carla. He gave me this kitten, Mira said. Said it was a reward. I kept it alive for 2 weeks before it ran away. Or maybe I let it. They sat there in silence, two women decades apart, tied by guilt neither of them had asked for. After Carla left, Mira stood at the window for a long time. Then she said, "Maybe we weren't the only ones who were scared." I nodded. Maybe we were the only ones brave enough to come back. That night, she began a new sketch. Not of me. Not of herself. But of a woman. Eyes tired. Shoulders strong. And in the corner of the page, a kitten. Running toward light. The air changed before anything else did. I noticed it one morning when I stepped outside barefoot, coffee in hand. The breeze didn't bite like it used to. It brushed past me gently, like the world was finally exhaling. Like the ghosts that had lived in our soil, our walls, our skin, were done haunting. Mira joined me on the porch a few minutes later. Her hair was damp from a shower, tied loosely back. She carried her sketchbook and a letter clutched in the same hand. "I got a call," she said. "From a lawyer." I turned. Her voice was calm, but her knuckles were white around the envelope. "He said there's an estate," she continued. "Belonging to Dad. Apparently he died 2 months ago. Alone. In a trailer park outside Harrisburg." I didn't say anything. They couldn't find anyone for weeks. Then they dug into his past. Found my name on some old documents. Said there's a few things left, money, a few personal items. He left no will. She looked at me. "What do I do, Belle? Do I touch it? Take it?" I shook my head slowly. "That's not an inheritance. That's residue." She let out a soft laugh. "That's exactly what I thought." She walked down the steps and burned the envelope in the flower bed. We watched the flame curl around it and vanish, like it had been waiting for permission. That afternoon, we drove out to the coast. We hadn't done that in years, just drive, with no destination. No plan. Mira rolled the windows down, her sketchbook on her lap, scribbling when the light shifted through the trees. At a roadside diner, she bought 2 slices of cherry pie and asked the waitress if she could leave a drawing in the tip jar. It was a sketch of 2 little girls. One hiding behind the other. The one in front had a cape. The one behind had eyes too wide for her age. On the bottom she'd written, "To every girl who was told to be quiet. We heard you." When we got home, we found a voicemail from Claire. She'd spoken to an organization that specialized in victims of long-term familial abuse. She said they wanted to feature our story anonymously, if we chose. She called it brave. She said women needed to know they weren't alone. Mira looked at me. "I'm ready," she said. That night, we sat by the fig tree in the garden, the one we planted over the box of pain we unearthed together. It was already taller. Greener. She reached over and took my hand. "You saved me," she whispered. "No," I said. "You came back. You walked through fire." I just opened the door. The stars above us were quiet. Familiar. Endless. We sat there until the wind shifted again, curling through the leaves with something softer. Something like forgiveness. Something like freedom. Before we begin, if this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe my channel. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from, and have you ever been betrayed by someone who shared your blood? Your words matter here. Now, let me finish telling you the story I never thought I'd live to say out loud. The nonprofit published our piece in early spring. It was a quiet release, anonymized, simple, dignified. No faces. Just words. The title, "When Your Reflection is the One Who Saved You." Myra's drawings accompanied each chapter. Her art told the parts of the story we couldn't bear to say aloud. One showed 2 girls with the same face, one buried in shadows, the other holding out a match. Another had a pair of feet standing barefoot in ashes, roots growing from beneath their toes. The response was overwhelming. Letters came in. Messages. Anonymous comments from women and men who had lived through similar hells. Some never told a soul until then. Some didn't even know what they'd lived through until they saw it sketched in Myra's lines, written in my words. We were no longer alone. A month later, we stood in front of the mirror in my hallway again. The same one I had once covered, ashamed of the face that reminded me too much of pain. I looked at Myra's reflection beside mine. And I saw it differently now. Not as a duplicate. Not as a rival. But as a woman who had carried fire in her lungs and chose to breathe anyway. I'm proud of you, I said softly. She smiled, the kind that reached all the way up to her eyes. I'm proud of us. We framed one of her drawings and hung it in the kitchen. The one of two girls planting something small in the dirt. On the frame, we engraved the words, "It didn't start with us. But it ends with us." Daniel never tried to reach out again. The world knew too much. He faded into the backdrop of his own failures. A man who mistook control for love and silence for victory. As for Mira and me, we started teaching workshops, quiet ones at first, small groups. Just women and their notebooks, pencils, brushes. Spaces where pain didn't have to be performed, just poured. We learned that healing isn't a clean road. It's cracked. Twisted. Sometimes you bleed again before you bloom. But here's what I know now, I am not just a twin. Not just a wife who was betrayed. Not just a woman who stood in courtrooms of memory and lit matches in the dark. I am Isabel Reeves. And I am no one's shadow. Not anymore.